Hello everyone and welcome back. This is Deja with Twisted Sisters Mojo, and today's video is going to be talking about the Lenormand system and the meanings of the cards. Now, Raven considers the Lenormand system falling into the category of an oracle deck. I don't. To me, the Lenormand is much like the tarot system, where each card in a Lenormand deck has a very specific meaning. It doesn't change from deck to deck to deck. Like card 1 in a Lenormand deck is generally always going to be the rider. And a Lenormand deck has on average, and I say on average, a 36 cards contained within the deck. Now, a lot of artists out there, they add and expand on the 36 card system, and I believe the reason that they do that is because a lot of readers feel like 36 cards is not enough to give a really in-depth, detailed reading. I don't necessarily believe that's true, so I've done a ton of readings using a Lenormand deck that have been wonderfully in-depth. Now, one thing about the Lenormand deck is it does, on some level, lack the spiritual and metaphysical nuances that you find within a tarot deck. But that doesn't mean that the cards don't have those associations. It just means that the card meanings themselves are very much mundane based. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the cards. I am using the Art Nouveau Lenormand for this. It's a very pretty deck. Generally, I would use Cyril Marchetti's Gilded Revelry because that's my go-to. But for this one, I went ahead and used this deck because it is a standard 36 card deck. So let me take these back out the box. And the first card we're going to talk about is the Rider. Now, the Rider card always has one of two things. Or two things. It has a horse and it has a rider. Now, when you draw a rider card in a Lenormand reading, you're looking at something that symbolizes messages, news, communication, people that deliver messages. In this day and age, it can talk about emails and social media content, and it can also on some level talk about traveling, movement, beginnings of journeys. So that's the base meaning of the rider within the Lenormand deck. The second one we're going to look at is Clover. Now, in most decks, the Clover is going to be more prevalent and primary, versus in this deck you have the woman as the main figure. In a lot of Lenormand decks, the Clover is front and center, and it is there. It is obvious what it is. When we're talking about the Clover, we're talking about luck. We're talking about gamblings. We're talking about some kind of prosperity on some level. Luck. Clovers can also be associated with work very loosely. Again, it's going to depend on what it's paired with. So looking at card 3, we're talking about, if I can get this thing in focus, we're talking about the ship. Now with the ship, that is definitely talking about travel. It's talking about distance. It's talking about movement. It's talking about trade and commerce. And it is also another one that can be associated with work and communications. With the ship, if it's paired with other cards that are talking about communication, it could be a letter that's arriving, or it could be telling you that you need to make changes and shift the direction in which you're going. So very simple, very direct. The next one we're going to talk about is, why am I missing the 1, 2, and 3? Yep. Okay. The next one we're going to talk about is the House. And that's a pretty easy card to talk about. That is talking about home. It's talking about family. It's talking about where you've set down your roots. It could be talking about your physical home. It can also be talking about a situation where you feel content, or a place where you feel content. So let's say it's paired with a card that you've asked a question about love, and it's paired with something that is indicating love. It could mean that you found your home. You found this person that makes you feel complete, that is the half to your whole, that kind of thing. So while most, like I said, the cards are very direct, and they do lack a lot of the metaphysical traits and nuances of a tarot deck, the reader can take them and should take them deeper than the surface meanings. The next one we're talking about is the tree. When we're talking about the tree, we're talking about health, genetics, healing, the roots to which the person came from, where they're going, how they may expand on their project, or talks about their personal growth on a metaphysical level. So it is very much about, and it is very much considered a health card also. So whenever the tree pops into play, if it's in reverse, it's indicating that the individual needs to check their health and maybe take a little bit better care of themselves. So that is one of the main things that the tree is associated with. Number 6, we are talking about clouds. Now this is one of those that's not necessarily a positive card. When you look at it, it seems kind of ambivalent and kind of just like, but with clouds, we're talking about doubt. We're talking about uncertainty. We're talking about confusion. We're talking about maybe mental states that are a little discombobulated, emotional states that are a little discombobulated. So it's really about that whole uncertainty and confusion thing. Now with number 7, we're talking about the snake. Now with the snake, it's generally not one of those cards that you want to see in a reading, because it is talking about your enemies. It's talking about manipulation. It's talking about shady behavior and dishonesty. It could be indicating that someone around you is not a positive influence on you. It can even indicate that maybe you're lying to yourself on some level. So the snake is another one of those cards that you generally don't like to see pop up in a reading, but it does happen. The next one we're going to talk about is, I don't know if I can get this in focus here. The next one we're going to talk about is the Coffin. The Coffin talks about illness. It talks about death. It talks about endings. It can indicate that the person is ill on some level, be it mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or mentally. And that is going to also depend on what that card is paired with and the question asked. So again, it's not exactly one of those, yay, I've got the Coffin, I want to see that in a reading. No. Generally when the Coffin pops up, it's like, oh crap. So, but you also have to look at if any of the cards that we're talking about that have a more negative connotation pop up, you, the reader, need to look at that and maybe explain that to your client as more of a warning or a preventive maintenance type of mindset is what I usually try to do when I'm doing readings and not so popular happy cards pop up. Okay. The next one we're going to talk about is the Bouquet. Now, again, with this deck, the artist has used a lot of figures as the primary focus. In most Lenormand decks, you're just going to see a bunch of flowers, and it's very obviously a bouquet. When we're talking about the bouquet, we're talking about happiness. We're talking about surprises. We're talking about gifts coming your way. We're talking about blessings. And it's generally a really, really happy card. It can also be talking about social situations. It can also be talking about your friends and your interaction with your friends, or being in a very positive place in your work environment. So the bouquet is a very, very light and happy card. All right, so we're going to jump into number 10, which is the Scythe. Let's see if I can get this. The Scythe. Now, the Scythe is not exactly a happy card either. The Scythe talks about accidents, bad luck, the cutting away of things, the brutal removal of situations. If it's paired with if the question's about love and it's paired with a love card, it can mean endings and sharp disassociation with that romantic situation. So with a Scythe, it's a very active, harsh card. And that's one of the, I do like the fact about the Lenormand system is that, you know, the negative cards are very negative, they're very direct. The positive cards are very positive and they're very direct. And the meanings are very easy to learn. So, all right, so we've talked about the Scythe. With the Whip, now with the Whip, you'll sometimes see it paired with the Broom up here, but the Whip is generally portrayed by itself. The Whip can talk about abuse. It can talk about self-destructive tendencies. It can talk about being stuck in a situation where you're constantly repeating the same pattern of behavior over and over again, and you're not necessarily learning from the experiences that you have. So it's very repetitive. It's just like imagining someone being punished and whipped over and over and over and over and over again. So when you think of the cards, you need to think about that. On a more mundane kind of level, it can talk about situations where the individual is a very athletic person that's into who has a mindset of being constantly in motion. So that's the general meaning of the Whip. The next one we are going to look at is card 12. And card 12 is birds. Now with card 12, birds, we're talking very much about communication. That's one of its primary meanings, is communication. It can also talk about family members, like parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and or people that are of an older generation that are playing a big influence on you right now in this situation or whatever the situation is. In this day and age, it talks about social media, emails, things like that. So birds is a very positive card, but it does generally associate with people that are coming into play in regards to the situation in which you're talking about. So we jump into card 13. That is the Child. Now, Child is very much self-explanatory on a mundane level. It does talk about children. It can indicate the coming of children. It can talk about you as a person maybe beginning a certain project, and that project being at its very beginning, being at its infant stage. And it can also talk directly about your children or the children in your lives. So it's very much it is a person card. We're going to go into number 14. Now, 14 is the fox. And there's a couple of schools of thought about the fox. It can talk about the people that you work with. It can talk about your job, your career, being creative, and that fiery energy that you have about something that you're passionate about. But it can also talk about people in your lives that maybe are a little deceptive, that maybe you're not seeing who they are or what the situation is. So while the fox seems positive on the surface, there is another level to it that talks about maybe shady behavior and things not necessarily being what they seem. So that's the fox. And we are going to jump into Das Oros, the bear. All right, so with the bear, we're talking about strength. We're talking about personal power. We're talking about being a very calm person that maybe you don't want to rile up because you don't want to piss the bear off. We're talking about someone that is maybe of an authority figure. This could be your boss. This could be your parents. The bear is a very positive card. If he pops up in reverse, then yeah, that, that meaning is going to change, but we're not talking about reversals in this video. We're talking about just straight upright positions. So, I just lost my train of thought. Okay, backtrack. Whoop. Okay, the bear. The bear also talks about, he can be associated very much with your family and can also be talking about you as a parent. So that's what we're looking at with the bear. Number 16. I don't know if you can see that. Much like the tarot, the star card, number 16, is about hope. It's about creativity. It's about the light at the end of the tunnel. It's about seeing through all of the difficulties that you have going. And it can also talk about the progress that you're making as you're going through work, or you're going through a relationship, or you're going through whatever evolutionary spiritual changes that you're going through. So 16 does have a lot of correlation to the tarot and the tarot meanings. If I had to associate an element, of course, I would associate the star card with water. So, but, okay. This is a pretty self-explanatory one. This is, what is this, number 17. This is the stork. All right, so this is the stork. Everybody, well, not everybody, but if you're of my age, in my generation, we all heard about how babies were made. The stork brought them. So the stork talks about birth, talks about childbirth, talks about the changes that come with parenthood. It can also talk about the change that you're going through in your life. It can talk about the birth of new ideas. It can talk about the birth of new chapters in your life. So the stork is about change and active motion, and things kind of being from the beginning. Unlike the tarot, where the Fool, in the major arcana, the Fool starts out his journey and each of the cards marks his journey, the Lenormand system is kind of scattered all over the place. So it doesn't follow that kind of format. All right, so number 18. Okay, number 18. I don't know if you can see that. I'm really trying here. All right, number 18 is the dog. The dog talks about your friends. It talks about the companions in your life. It talks about people that you're comfortable with. It can even talk about, like, your own personal pets. I generally don't see that in a reading. I generally see it as your best friend or the people around you. It's generally a very positive card. And it talks about also being the type of person that is loyal, that is steadfast, that is someone that it talks about positive reliability. So that's the dog. 19. We are looking at the Tower. Now, unlike the Tower in the tarot, the Tower in a Lenormand deck talks about isolation, being alone, someone who is trying to maybe handle everything by themselves without anyone else's help. It can also indicate a feeling of loneliness and not being connected to the world around you. So the Tower is, to me, it's a warning card that you really need to look at your life and maybe allow people in or allow situations to manifest rather than holding yourself back and keeping yourself separate. All right. And number 20 is the Garden. This is the social card. This is your friends, your companions, parties, celebrations, social events, organization. On a mundane level, it does talk about like your landscape and the things that you've planted in your life. So this has been cards 1 through 20. We will hit the rest of the Lenormand deck on the next video. This has been Deja with Twisted Sisters Mojo. Please do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button, and we will see y'all on the next video.